This week, I bring you Herod the Great. He's our story this week. So the thing about Herod is that he's perhaps the most famous figure of the Second Temple period, and probably also the most hated. Now, the question, Herod doesn't really come from any of the dynasties that we know. So Herod. So how does Herod come to power? So let's just go back to our last lecture. Our last lecture was about essentially the house of the Hashmonaim. And at the end of the house of the Hashmonaim, there were two brothers, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. And they're essentially wrestling over control of Judea. Now, the Hyrcanus side of the picture both conquered and then made allies with Edom. In the scholarly literature, they're called the Idumeans. And Herod's father's name is Antipater. And Antipater is a close ally of Hyrcanus, and he's also recognized as a very capable leader. And his two sons, Faisal and Herod, are given various jobs in Israel, and especially after the Romans, Pompey, in 63 BCE, take over in Israel. So there's still some people, sort of, I guess, people who were real Hasidim of the Hashmonaim, of the Maccabees, who really want to make sure that they want to do everything they can to bring back Jewish independence. And so there are these sort of brigands, and they're waging guerrilla warfare. And so who is appointed to ensure that this guerrilla warfare is an end? Well, the person who's appointed in the Golan is Herod. And Rome really likes him because he happens to be very effective. He's good at what he does. He's excellent at putting down guerrilla warfare. That is sort of one of the secret talents of Herod. And that's sort of what puts him into spectacular light in the eyes of the Romans. And the Romans understand also that once they take control of Israel, they're going to need strong leadership, right? Remember, empire is a franchise business. And if you don't staff your empire well, you're in trouble. And so Rome as an empire did what the Greeks had done. They want to give religious freedom, but they also want capable leaders in those areas. And so they're looking for someone who has capable leadership skills, and Herod is that individual. And he's made into a tetrarch. Now, the other great power at the time were the Persians. And the Persians support the other side of the family, Antigonus. And essentially, there is a bit of a wrestling match. For a short period of time, the Persians have the upper hand. And during this short period of time, Herod has his first taste of living as a fugitive. And he doesn't like that. Now, we're just going to remember that because that is going to very much inform how Herod manages the rest of his life. You know, there are a number of very nice little taglines about that you can put to Herod. Like, if you could make a series of Herod t-shirts, there are going to be a whole bunch of them. I'll give you a couple good lines to put on your Herod t-shirts. But one of my favorite ones is the old maxim that says, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not trying to kill you. That is a very sort of a Herod sort of a thing to understand. Herod is always going to be paranoid, and he's going to be paranoid because at the beginning of his life, Herod was on the run from the brief period of time that the Persians took over from Rome. Herod, though, is a wise and skilled operator, and Herod is going to realize that when Rome recaptures Jerusalem, that it is going to put it in the hands of someone who's very capable. And here we're going to come to really the great tension that Rome is going to have. So who are the natural aristocracy in Judea? Who's the natural aristocracy?
The Maccabees.
Perfect, exactly. The Maccabees are the natural aristocracy. The Hashmonaim, they're the ones who had been ruling for the past 150 or so years, right? The last ruler, last undisputed ruler was Shlomtzion Hamalka, Salome Alexandra. She had these two sons, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. Yeah, they wrestled for a little while, but ultimately Rome is going to look for its good client king. It's going to look for someone who's going to be able to take control there. And that person is going to be Herod. And Herod realizes, though, that he has not a drop of Hashmona'i blood. And so what does Herod do? Herod marries into the family. Hyrcanus, who realizes that he's going to need a stronger leader, he marries his daughter Miriam to Herod. So Herod's claim to the throne is because he marries one of the Hashmonaim. Now, Herod comes from, as I mentioned earlier, his father is from Edom, or the scholars called it Idumean. They were maybe forcibly converted. The Torah is going to assume, the Talmud is going to assume that this is a so-so conversion, and that Herod may not even really be Jewish, or maybe not be fully Jewish. In any event, no matter how Jewish you think he really is, he's certainly not a Kohen, and he's certainly not a Kohen Gadol. So he is not even a contender in the historical mantle of leadership that is placed upon the kings of Israel. And so who do we have here? We have this guy who's essentially a pretender to the dynasty. He's in only by marriage. And so when you're in this kind of situation, you have to realize that the people may look for other potential sources of power, other potential legitimate sources of power. So who are the other potential and legitimate sources of authority in Herod's day? Yeah, Tony.
Kohanim?
Good, the Kohanim. So the Kohanim. So you have one group is certainly the Kohanim. So let's call them the Hashmonaim, right? The various surviving members of the dynasty that started with Matityahu and Yehuda HaMaccabi. So that's one potential contender to the throne, contender to leadership in Israel. Who's another?
Rabbi, as you've taught us, the Hashmonaim were not descendants of David, but obviously, if they're people that can identify themselves as descendants of David now, there must have been at the time.
Okay, good. Okay, so we might be looking for someone who might have aristocratic blood, who could say he was from the house of David. That would be fantastic. It does not seem like anybody emerged with that particular resume, but there's another kind of leadership that starts to emerge in this period, right?
Can I ask you, who's Ezra and Nehemiah?
Ezra and Nehemiah. So Ezra and Nehemiah were 3 lectures ago. But aside from the fact that they were 3 lectures ago, they were the leadership that took the Jewish people from Babylonia and reestablished Jerusalem in the period just before Alexander the Great. Then you have Alexander the Great. Then in the generation sort of after Alexander the Great, that's when you have Matityahu and Judah the Maccabee.
So were the other leaders, the Pharisees, the Prushim?
Oh, Mina, perfect. The Pharisees, otherwise known as the rabbis, right? The rabbinic leadership is the other potential source of political leadership. So Herod, being very astute, realizes that these 2 groups of people could be very dangerous to him. So what does he do? He selectively looks at who are the different people who can become Kohen Gadol. So one is his father-in-law. His father-in-law, whose name was Hyrcanus. If you remember last week, I told you that Hyrcanus, when there was a bit of a tussle between the 2 sides of the families of the Maccabees, and you had the Persians come in for a brief period of time. So Antigonus, Hyrcanus' nephew, leaned over to give his uncle a kiss and bit off his ear. So Hyrcanus is the father-in-law, the oldest of the Maccabees. He has no ear. And so if you don't have an ear, you can't be Kohen Gadol. So he's safe. He's not going to be the Kohen Gadol. But Herod's wife, Miriam, has a brother. So the brother, he could be Kohen Gadol. He is not appointed immediately because he's young. So so Herod finds a Kohen from Bavel, whose name was Hananel. Very nice, he's in there, but soon there's a lot of murmurings. It says, well, you got to reinstate your brother-in-law when he comes of age. So here, Herod does in fact reinstate him. And Herod, being the nice guy he does, he says, let's go on a vacation. We're going to go to Jericho. We're going to go to Jericho on vacation. And do you know what happened on that vacation in Jericho? The darndest thing. Herod's brother-in-law, the Kohen Gadol, seems to die in a swimming accident. I guess they forgot to hire a lifeguard. Sort of one of those sort of mysterious coincidental deaths. But less coincidental than that is the fact that Herod seems to, in the year 37, he seems to eliminate the entire Sanhedrin. That he just simply wipes out the entire Sanhedrin. And in so doing, you see the very beginnings of what will become a pattern of Herod's life, that Herod is not necessarily the most entitled to the throne. He's simply very good at eliminating all other candidates to ensure that nobody really challenges his authority. Herod is also acutely aware of the fact that he is not well liked. He's acutely aware of the fact that he's not really Jewish. He's acutely aware of the fact that he's not really one of the Hashmonaim. And so I want to just show you something that you may never have actually paid attention to before. I know I hadn't before I did the research on this. And this is a picture of what's called the Antonia Fortress. It's named after Mark Antony, and I'll tell you the irony of the name of it being named after Mark Antony. But if you look at where this fortress is, can you tell where it is in relation to the portico that is just below it? So here we go. This is the Antonia Fortress. So the Antonia Fortress, if you can see right here, it sits right above the portico of the Beit HaMikdash. That what you saw, what I just highlighted right there, that's the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash. Herod knows that he, in order to hold the people, in order to retain authority, he's not a Kohen. He doesn't have any of that natural authority. So what he's going to do is he's going to build a fortress there that is going to secure his strength, military strength, right there at the temple. So that everybody knows, you go to worship at the temple, as you're passing through in your gates to enter the temple, that's the southeast corner, you're going to see that the military might of Herod. There are 4 towers there, and it is a very powerful fortress. And according to Josephus, Herod would take the Bigdei Kuhuna, the clothes of the Kohen, and he would put them into this fortress, so that even though he didn't naturally control the Beit HaMikdash, he, in a sense, asserted his control, so that the people would know who was really in charge. You can, by the way, the reason you've never seen this before is because there's almost nothing left of it. What is left of it now is right here in this building that you can see from this little architectural sketch. This is the Umayya school. It looks like a familiar building in Jerusalem, but it's probably on the eastern side of Jerusalem. And this orange part on the bottom is where they found the remnants of the fortress that Herod built. This is sort of an important piece of the picture, because the piece of the picture here is that Herod is going to build lots of fortresses. Herod is going to be in charge of the Roman army. He is the client king. And with his military abilities and his ability to understand who is in power, he is going to control Judea. And as we saw already, he controls Judea by eliminating people, not least of which are members of his own family. Now, Herod had to make one of the greatest bets in all of political history, right? You have Antony and Cleopatra on the one hand, and you have Augustus on the other, right? And there's this famous battle that takes place between them, the Battle of Actium. And Herod backs Antony. Now, you can, if you want to put in the chat, if you know who won the Battle of Actium, you can say so in the chat. Seems like the audio is not working so well. So anybody want to write in there who won the Battle of Actium? Well, I'll tell you this, it wasn't Antony. So Herod actually was almost going to support Antony with troops, but for various reasons, not least of which was because his own family prevented him from doing that, and Cleopatra also said that she thought it was better for him to send money. So he ended up supporting Antony financially. Augustus Caesar, later Octavian, is going to know that Herod supported the other side. And so Herod has to ultimately make for Rome to plead his case to remain king with Caesar Augustus, with Octavian. When he does so, when Herod does so, he goes there and he knows he has to be totally honest. He basically says, look, I supported the other side. Let's not pretend that didn't happen. I was totally behind Antony, but I'm about as slimy as anybody you know. And I'm always about supporting the person who is in power. And Octavian respected that, essentially, as far as we understand, and really understood that having someone like Herod was very valuable to him, because he could stand as little upheaval in the Roman Empire as possible. And so what he was really interested in was good people who understood the power game and understood the Roman deal. And Herod fit the role exactly. And the truth is that Herod will serve Octavian very well for most of Herod's life. What is fascinating to me is what happens after Octavian accepts Herod as the king of Judea. They go out to the temple of Jupiter, and Herod offers a sacrifice to Jupiter. Now this is really rather startling, right? That you have this Jewish king who knows that I wouldn't say this Jew-ish king, right? Because Herod's not fully entrenched. He's not he's not kissing his tzitzis every morning. And you have this Jewish-ish king who's building a fortress in the corner of the Beit HaMikdash because he knows he needs to control that. But even as he is given the mantle for Judea, he goes out and sort of celebrates that fact with a pagan rite in the heart of Rome. And I think this, in a way, sort of is a very interesting picture of what's happening in Judea at the time. Okay. Now, what is interesting as well is that the Talmud, I'm going to try and enlarge this. Let me see if I can enlarge this so that it is visible. I just want to see if I can get it to be readable. Okay, is this readable to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do this. Right. We'll do this in the English. We'll do this in the English because my assumption is that most people here are more comfortable in the English than they are in the Hebrew. So it goes as follows. It says, let me a little context for this. This is a section of the Talmud in Baba Batra. Baba Batra here is dealing with the issue of destroying a synagogue to rebuild a synagogue. And it is relevant to the story because Herod wants to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. there is a fear at the same time that when Herod rebuilds the Beit HaMikdash, that Herod is also going to destroy the Beit HaMikdash, and that his suggestion to rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash, his suggestion that he's going to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash is really just a ruse to destroy it. It is in this context that the Talmud is sort of taking up this discussion, and this is the way the rabbis of the Talmud see Herod. He says as follows. Starting up here at the, I'll try and use the highlighter to show you where I am. Okay.
Can I just ask you one question? King
Sure.
Solomon built the Beit HaMikdash, but who built the second temple?
Okay. Good question. So quick review of Second Temple. King Solomon builds the first temple. The first temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. 70 years later, 70 years later, Ezra and Nehemiah come back together with Zerubbabel. It is a long effort to rebuild the second Beit HaMikdash to some poor shadow of the first. Herod, the Beit HaMikdash that we see remnants of, the Western Wall, are all built under Herod. And he is a very, very prolific builder, and the Beit HaMikdash is maybe one of his grandest projects. Does that help contextualize it?
Yeah, it was Ezra and Nehemiah and Herod then. They all built it.
Because Ezra and Nehemiah live 300 years before Herod, 200 years before Herod. So Ezra and Nehemiah started. Herod is a renovation project.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, so here's what the Talmud is. Herod was a servant of the Hasmoneans, right? In other words, it uses the word avda here, which is the Hebrew or Aramaic word, Hebrew root. Eved means a servant. There was a girl amongst them. There was a girl amongst them upon whom he cast his eyes. One day he heard a voice saying, "A servant should rebel now. A servant who should rebel now will succeed." He rose and slew all his masters, but spared the girl. When he saw that he intended to marry her, she ascended to the roof and raised her voice. She proclaimed, "Whoever comes and claims himself descended from the Hasmoneans, be it known that he is a servant. For all the Hasmoneans were slain except for myself, and I'm now throwing myself from the roof to the ground." So this story bears some resemblance to the history. I should say that it is not my belief, and I'm aided by a professor at Bar Ilan on this, Dr. Yonatan Feintuch, who basically says, look, the rabbis are giving you a sort of a vista to history, but they're not looking at this as a pure historical document. It's sort of more like an editorial cartoon. And who is this girl? Well, this girl must be Herod's wife, Miriam, Mariamene, who is, at least in the Latin sources or the Greek sources. And so this woman is the one who gives him his claim to the throne, but she's already proclaiming that he's a fake. Now Herod later in his life, because he's afraid that she will join forces with other members of her family, more extended family, and depose him. So Herod kills her too. And it is rumored, Josephus says, that Herod continued to talk to her for the rest of his life, even after she died. He names towers after her. So it is a very odd relationship Herod had with her. But this is how the Talmud interprets this scenario. Herod preserved her body in, in honey for 7 years. And some say he had intercourse with her. Some say he did not. According to those that say he had intercourse with her, he preserved her body in order to satisfy his lust. According to those who say he didn't, he preserved her so that people should say he has married the daughter of a king. Right? Now, this is already a very interesting, provocative narrative. Right? The source here is already telling us that Herod has a very strange sense of how to behave. Now we're going to get the second story. Herod said to himself, who expounds the verse? Be sure to set a king over yourself of one of your own people, which is Som tasim alecha melech mikerav achecha. You shall certainly put a king upon you from amongst your brethren. Well, Herod has a deficiency here. Herod is a convert. His family is from Edom. He's not true blue Jewish. And so he wonders, maybe I'm not really authentic. So he says, who expounds this verse? In other words, who's the one who's going to tell the people that I'm not a real king? It's going to be the rabbis. The rabbis are the ones who have this drasha that says, Som tasim alecha melech mikerav achecha, put a king upon yourself only from amongst your brethren. So he reasons to himself, these rabbis are going to see me as not valid. So what does he do? He rose and slew all the rabbis and spared only Baba ben Buta. Baba ben Buta is an interesting figure. Baba ben Buta is really a student of Shammai who sort of is more intellectually aligned with Hillel than he was with Shammai. So we're now in the generation after Hillel and Shammai, and you have this individual, Baba ben Buta, who's really the only remaining rabbi. He's sort of the only figure who survives the Herodian rabbinic genocide. And he left this one rabbi around so that Herod could counsel with him. He placed a garland of lizards around his head and bore out his eyes. This particular phrase over here, the phrase of Kalila Daili, so that is the phrase that we're unsure if it means lizards or it could mean a hedgehog. And Yonatan Feintuch in his footnotes says that it is very possible that the rabbis are working off of a very similar concept as the crown of thorns that another Jew once wore in the same general vicinity. And the hedgehog, the crown of hedgehogs, the thistles of the hedgehog may have poked out his eyes. So it may be that the crown blinded him. But however he got blinded, we now have the blind Baba ben Buta. And one day, Herod comes to him incognito. It's not hard to be incognito in front of a blind man. He can't see who you are. So then they engage in this conversation. What's the conversation that they are going to engage in? So let me just scroll it properly. Okay. Amar. Chazimar hai avda. Oh, sorry. He said, what he came to him and he said, let the master see what the bad servant has done. So he's trying to prompt Baba ben Buta to say something bad about what Herod has done, because Herod is even referring to himself as a servant. The rabbis are going to see Herod as always thinking of himself as less than who he is. He's always compensating for the fact that he's not really a true king. And so Baba ben Buta answers, what can I do to him? So Herod then prompts, you could curse him. Baba answered with the verse, don't revile a king even among your intimates. Meaning, if you have things to say against the king, keep quiet. Herod said, but he's not a king. Again, it is Herod who articulates his own deficiencies. Baba ben Buta answered, let him be only rich. It is written, don't revile a rich man even in your bedchambers. So Baba ben Buta seems to be pulling out all of these psukim, all of these different verses from the Torah, which essentially says, don't criticize the wealthy, don't criticize the king. Keep yourself at arm's length from any potential threats. Okay. And even if he's only a chieftain, it is written, nor put a curse upon a chieftain among your people. So we then the conversation is going to continue. Herod said, this is only when he conducts himself as one of your people, but he does the contrary. So Herod again is sort of in this rabbinic conversation. Herod is the one who's saying, He acts like a total goy, right? Herod saying this of himself. So he answered, Baba Ben Buta answers, I fear him. So Herod said, but there is no one who could go and tell him, as only you and I are sitting here. So who's going to say? So Baba Ben Buta, again, finds another pasuk. A bird in the air could carry the utterance. A winged creature could report the word. He says, I'm not going to do it. Don't tempt me. Herod said, I am him. Had I known that the rabbis were so cautious, I would not have slain them. Here, Herod is articulating that he is afraid of, he regrets having killed the rabbis. But now what may my remedy be? So Baba answered him, you've put out the light of the world, meaning the rabbis, the Torah. For the commandment is a lamp, ki miner mitzvah Torah, or the commandment is a lamp and the Torah and the teaching is light. Go therefore and occupy yourself with the light of the world. Right? As it is written, and the nation shall gaze on it with joy. The nation shall gaze on the temple with joy. So what should you do, Herod? If you want to make up for having killed all the rabbis, improve the temple. Some say, Baba Ben Buta answered, you have blinded the eye of the world. As is written, if through the inadvertence, literally, if it should be hidden from the eyes of the community. That's a verse about the Torah. So he says, go therefore and occupy yourself with the eye of the world. I am going to desecrate my sanctuary, your pride and glory, the delight of your eyes. These two sections mean the same thing. They're essentially, Baba Ben Buta is talking about light or eyes, and he says to Herod, in one case you put out the light, in the second case, build the light, the Beit HaMikdash. The other case, you blinded the eyes of the rabbis, so build up the eye is the Beit HaMikdash. Okay. Herod said, I fear the kingdom. In this case, the kingdom means Rome. So Baba Ben Buta said, send a messenger to Rome. He shall travel for a year and let him remain there a year, and his returning shall also take a year. And by you can take it apart and rebuild it. You can go and rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. So I want to show you something really interesting about this particular section of this narrative. Kill all but leave one. There's a theme that runs through this. Kill everyone, leave one. That's what Herod does. So Herod kills all of the members of the house of the Hashmonaim, and he leaves a girl. He kills all of the rabbis, and he leaves one rabbi. And the way that the rabbis are going to interpret this is in this, you'll see that the words that they use, it says, Kam katlinhu l'chulhu. He says, he went and he killed all of them. Right here, Kam katlinhu l'chulhu. And then here, Kam katlinhu l'chulhu. Come and kill all of them. In both cases, he says, come and kill all of them. Vishaire, and he left one available. Shaire. And then this case, he says, Boy leminsaba. In the case of the girl, he wanted to marry them. And here it says that he went to Lemesav to go and to ask for advice. So you can see that the language that the Talmud is using is very parallel language between these two stories. Hold on one second. Okay. Why is this not? There we go. Hold on. Just trying to get my notes to appear properly. Okay. Okay. So what I think is also interesting here is that that it also reflects the idea of the way Herod behaves in terms of lots of other things. Herod very often will do something and then make up for it later. He will take the expedient route and make up for it later. And this story sort of has this experience of how Herod does that exact thing. He's going to eliminate all of the pretenders to the throne, but then find himself deficient in terms of ruling the people. And the idea that Herod preserved the house of the Hashmonaim dead in amber. It's a very powerful image. What do you think the rabbis are sort of saying about that image? Think about just that one image, that Herod is preserving the last member of the house of the Hashmonaim. He's now killed all of the members of the Hashmonaim, or maybe she committed suicide, but he preserved her. How does he preserve her? In honey. What is that image? What is that cartoon telling you about the house of the Hashmonaim? Okay, so either you're all practicing very good muting skills, or, oh, okay. How does the killing of the rabbis by Herod tie into the Yom Kippur prayer list and the killing of various Gaonim? So it doesn't, because those rabbis all lived about a century later. But we'll talk about how those two things might be related in a larger thematic level. But getting back to my little image. My image is, the house of the Hashmonaim is a mere shadow of itself, right? It's nothing. It's not really, it doesn't really hold any of the religious future of the people. The house of the Hashmonaim, it's a ossified relic preserved in amber, right? It provides about as much help to the world as the bees ossified in amber can pollinate a flower. Right? You have this very, very strong literary picture of the attempt to hold on to the relic of what was. And the rabbis are sort of showing you how that is. We also, Yonatan Feintuch says that he thinks that the image of Herod continuing to have intercourse with this ossified member of the house of the Hashmonaim is Herod's insatiable attempt to convince himself he's really a king. That in all of these stories, you have Herod sort of going back and sort of probing the wound, probing the issue. Am I really a king? Am I for real? Am I for real? What is sort of interesting is this one line. Let me go back to the line. Hold on. Very interesting line, but this is a line we're going to have to do in Hebrew. So I'm just going to go back to it. We're going to do it in Hebrew. Forgive me 1 second. I just have to find the line. Of course, these things elude you whenever you look for them. Okay, all right, you'll forgive me. I'm gonna skip this because why am I not finding this one line? But essentially, the line goes like this. It says, Avad bisha bater da avdin mit malchen. That a bad servant after they serve, they become kings after the deed is done. But there's another way to read this sentence, and the other way to read this sentence is that bad servants, after being servants, attempt to become kings. There's sort of the Talmud's play on words that shows you that the way that they're seeing Herod is that Herod was always suffered from the insecurity of not being an actual king. Now, I want to just point out to you one other source, which is very interesting. Herod does have some successors. One of his famous successors is his grandson, Herod Agrippus, right? And if you've been in Jerusalem, there's Agrippa Street, and Agrippus is sort of well known, and he's well loved as a king. And Agrippus, the Mishnah in Sota is talking about how the king is meant to read the Sefer Torah. And it says as follows. It says, that Agrippus essentially gets up, and it says, Agrippus HaMelech Amad V'Kibel V'Kara V'Omed. Agrippus the king got up and he received the Torah and he started to read. V'Shibchu Chachamim, and the rabbis praised him. Uk'shehigia, and when he got to the words, Lo tuchal latet alecha ish nochri, you cannot put a stranger above you as a king. Zalgu einav dmaot, his eyes filled with tears. So this is again Herod's grandson, Herod Agrippus. Amrulo, the rabbi said to Herod Agrippus, Al tityare Agrippus, Agrippus, don't worry. Achinu ata, achinu ata, achinu ata. You are our brother, you are our brother, you are our brother. So we have the story in the Mishnah, an earlier text, about Herod Agrippus, that he had the same lineage problem, and the rabbi is going to say, don't worry, you're our brother. What this tells us about this text is that the rabbis understood Herod very well. They understood that Herod had a very deep insecurity about the Jewish people, and he ruled by force. And Herod always knew that he stood on a delicate balance, that his authority always came from Rome, that when he says in right here in line 34, I fear the kingdom, that's Rome. He knew if Rome is not on his side, he's toast. His authority comes from the fact that Herod has troops. And so you have this very precarious mixture of Rome doing, in a way, exactly what it doesn't want to do. Rome would much prefer to have a good, naturally respected king who is their client king, who manages affairs for them. Just to show you how Herod sort of straddles the fence between these two worlds, Herod builds a temple to Octavian, a pagan temple he won't build it in Jerusalem, he'll build it outside. He'll build it in Caesarea, in some of the non-Jewish cities. It was very common during that period of time for kings to build statues to themselves. Herod does not build any statues, not that we found at all. Herod built only, he built palaces for himself, but he knew that the Jews would not suffer him to build an idol. And so he builds, certainly not in any of the Jewish cities. Maybe there was one found in one of the non-Jewish cities, but he doesn't build statues to himself. The other thing, which is I think is very worthwhile appreciating about Herod, is how much Herod would make the country Hellenized. So Herod, this is Herod's largest denomination coin, the 8 pruta coin. And I selected particularly this image because this image shows you that as opposed to the Hashmonaim's coins, which were printed in Hebrew, the Herodian coins are printed in Greek. And I just wanted to show you, I had to do a lot of research to figure this out, but I printed in Greek letters here at the bottom. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Visible? At the bottom, that means Herod Basilius. Basilius just means kingly or royal. And so the Greek inscription here tells you about where Herod's sympathies lie. Herod speaks Greek. Herod also does a lot of other interesting things. Herod will bring gladiatorial competitions to Jerusalem. He will bring a theater. He will bring a hippodrome. He will bring all of these Greek elements to Judea. Now,
Rabbi, what is the picture in the middle of the coin? What is that? Is that image in the middle of the coin?
I think it is a crown, because this means Herod the royal. So I think that is perhaps meant to be a stick figure with a crown. Could be wrong, and it's not my area of expertise. So, but I do want to show you one little video. So I'm going to just, okay. So this is, when I went to yeshiva, I went to yeshiva in Har Etzion. Har Etzion is in the Judean hills. And I remember all the time you pass these signs that tell you you can go to Herodium. And I never bothered to go to Herodium, but now am I sorry. So I'm going to show you a little bit about Herodium. Herodium is one of the many palaces / fortresses that Herod built. Now remember I told you early on in this conversation that Herod had a short taste of what it meant to be a refugee. And so Masada is one of those palace fortresses that Herod built. So many of us have visited Masada, but Herodium is possibly even more interesting. And so here it is a very interesting because not only is it sort of a man-made mountain, or it is a man-made mountain made even bigger, or is it mountain made by man even bigger, it is rumored that Herod even used to sail a boat in its swimming pool. So he loved to do things that would sort of reverse nature. Where there was no stream, he would bring an aqueduct. Where the mountain wasn't high enough, he would build it even higher. He loved those kinds of things. Okay, so here we go. I am sharing with you a little virtual tour of Herodium.
Many sites in the Holy Land attract tourists for being sacred to the Abrahamic religions. This site, however, became a successful site for one main reason: the character who stands behind it, King Herod. Welcome to the Herodium.
Herodium is located in the edge of the desert. Herod, in his early days, before he becomes the king of Judea, escapes from Hasmonean leader Antigonus. He survives here during the battle. He remembers this event. He promises himself that one day he'll build something here. When he becomes the king of Judea, he built his administrative center.
In Herodium, Herod brings his lavish lifestyle to a peak. Similar to other famous sites like Masada and Caesarea, he uses a round structure as a leading architectural element.
It was a very special palace, a welcoming palace. We can see it in the lower floor, the swimming pool, and the garden. And we can see the big garden here with trees and water. The good life Herod had influenced his surroundings.
One example of this magnificent lifestyle is the theater, small in size but impressive in its structure, overlooking the beautiful view of the Judean desert.
During the time of Herod, the theater was active only for a short while. It may be open for the visit of King Agrippa.
The royal chamber sits on top of the theater. This room, which is still under maintenance and not open to the public, depicts some marvelous and rare fresco paintings.
This room serves King Herod and his guests during the shows in the theater. What's special in this site is that we can see the stairs here, which give the place its cone-shaped structure. When Herod covers this site, the whole compound becomes cone-shaped.
Why did Herod cover these facilities in his palace, some of which were hardly in use? Experts say that in his late years, Herod, who saw the downfall of his kingdom, decided to turn his palace into a huge mausoleum. In 2007, archaeologist Professor Ehud Netzer claimed to find Herod's tomb.
We can see behind me the base to Herod's grave. It is the lower part of the mausoleum where they found sarcophagus of Herod and his family. We can see, according to the model, which stands next to the remains of the grave, that the mausoleum was around 25 meters high. Today, only a few remains were left after the Jewish rebels smashed it.
After Herod's death, Herodium continues to be a substantial administrative center for the Roman Empire. A recent discovery depicts a copper ring found 50 years ago in Herodium bearing the inscription of Pilate. Suggested by experts, it is a second artifact which refers to the infamous Roman judge who is responsible for Jesus' crucifixion. Herodium also played a major role during the Great Jewish Revolt of the 1st century CE.
During the Great Jewish Revolt, Jews who fled Jerusalem arrive here. They use the facilities, the room here, at Herod's fortress. They use all these facilities to protect themselves from the Romans who were chasing them. Inside Herod's palace, there is also a big lounge. The rebels use this lounge and turn it into a synagogue. They do it by adding 2 rows of seats, so the luxurious lounge becomes a synagogue. It is a unique synagogue because it is not turned towards Jerusalem like many other synagogues we know today. The prayer here is not towards Jerusalem.
So, so I wanted to just show you that because I thought it would be wrong to talk about Herod without talking about his architecture. And Herodium is a very impressive site. There are other ones, just to further the discussion a little bit about Herod and his architecture. 2 buildings that you may have seen that attest to Herod's architecture. One is the building at Me'arat HaMachpelah, the Cave of the Patriarchs. It's a beautiful Herodian building with Herodian stone. It's a magnificent site. This is something that Herod built in order to curry favor with the Jewish people. Herod essentially wanted to let people know that he cared about them and he was going to build them great buildings. The other building is one which we have all seen. Hopefully, almost all of us have been there, but that is the Beit HaMikdash itself, the temple structure itself. Now, as I said before, the Jews were afraid that Herod was going to build that as a pretext to destroying it. He said, let me destroy it and then I will rebuild it. The Jews would have none of that, so Herod has to expand it. And one of the very interesting things is Herod had Kohanim trained as masons and carpenters so that he could go about ensuring that that the Holy of Holies was not trampled upon by anybody who was not pure enough to enter there. So he had really a lot of respect, and he tried to do his best to placate the Jewish people. Just 2, I think, important theories to the whole picture. Theory 1 is that in the Pax Romana, under Octavian, you couldn't distinguish yourself as a king by waging war on someone else. So you had to distinguish yourself in a completely different way. And the way that you would do that was by building. And so Herod's prolific building was very much a product of Herod saying, I'm a great king, I can compete with the best of them. And Herod was a very successful king, and Octavian actually expands his territories because he realized that Herod is very, very effective. Herod, though, rules by fear. And Herod rules by fear, and we know this because Augustus Caesar famously said, and here's my second Herod t-shirt, I would rather be Herod's pig than his son. Because apparently Herod famously would not eat pork as a deference to his Jewish countrymen, but he would eliminate even his own sons if he thought they were a danger to his ability to keep power. And so Herod's brutal reign actually ensured stability in Judea, but it was sort of, and again, now I'm speaking again in theory, but this to me is very interesting. So the success of rulers after Herod is really mediocre. Rome has to administer Judea through a whole system of procurators. And the procurators are not always in tune with the Jewish people. The most famous of the procurators was Pontius Pilate. But there's a book that I sent off to my son. It's called The Ruling Class of Judea. sent it off to my son for a paper he was writing on Second Temple Judaism. And when he left for Montreal, when the pandemic began, I'm sure he left that book over there. But the theory of the book is like this, is that there was not a proper ruling class in the Jewish world, in Judea, in order for Rome to properly have a good way of administering its program and properly relating to the people. Herod's court was almost all Greek. His advisors, his judges, his administrators, his close confidants were, generally speaking, people from the Greek side of the population, not from the rabbis. And so what you end up with is you end up with a system in Israel where the wealth and the power belong to people who are not really connected to the populace. And it's a very sort of dangerous thing. What happens with Herod is Herod has a successful window from, I think, let's say 4037 BCE until 4 of the Common Era, and more or less maintains a very strong peace during that period of time. But after Herod, the record is much less smooth, and it ultimately blossoms into a full-scale rebellion in the year 66. And the thesis is that Herod's Hellenizing of the official levels of Judea, it creates this enormous wedge between the day-to-day life governed by halakha, rabbis, Jewish law, and this very strong and intimidating political machine, right? I'm just going to go back to one slide that sort of, I think, captures the entire picture, right? This idea of the fortress that lords over the Beit HaMikdash, that's the source of the problem. Who would think you need, there's no fortress lording over the Beit HaMikdash in the days of Shlomo HaMelech. You have it's a very, very different you have a very, very different approach with Herod, which is he's not a natural king, he's not of Israel, and he imposes this fearsome scenario where his authority is borrowed from Rome, but it's not integral to the people. And ultimately, you might see that the wedge that blossoms into the full-scale rebellion and the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash is really built of this this unstable table that does not have enough legs to support it. Okay, so questions.
So was he really unsure of himself, or is he being vilified by the Talmud later because for whatever reason maybe he wasn't a Jew? Was he really?
Well, Tony, he killed a lot of people to keep power. Sorry? He killed a lot of people to keep power.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. He was not Korean.
He was a predecessor. He was the prototype, right? He's a prototype for Kim Jong-un. But he even kills his own sons. He kills his wife and talks to her. I mean, this is a man who is paranoid, right? And not that people weren't trying to get him, but he lives with that insecurity, and he sort of knows he's not of the Jewish people. I mean, you have a king of the Jews who offers a sacrifice to a pagan god. That's not, I mean, I realize it's not the first king to do that. King Menashe also did that, but it's something jarring about the Jewish king going to Rome and offering a sacrifice to Zeus. All right, so just catching up on the chat here. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I missed something at the beginning, but were both of Herod's parents Edomian? I thought he was half Jewish.
His mother, his mother may have been Jewish. This may be true, but the fact that the Talmud refers to him as a servant speaks to the fact that they did not really see him as properly. In any event, he's not from the house of David, right? So I'm not sure about his mother. I have to look that up. this week I had to. We're now out of the biblical period, so I had to do sort of extra homework this week just to get the material together. This was quite a monumental. This is the first time that I had to really stretch into the post-biblical era. Okay, no other questions? Well, that's good because I'm supposed to be at Mincha in 2 minutes and my car does not drive that fast. So thank you all for joining in. It was great to have you. I'm glad we get to see you. And
thank you very much.
good.
Thanks, Mitchell, guys.